right. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight. Thank you for your patience as well. It's good to see everyone's faces in the crowd. This is our first in-person event in several years. So, yeah. All right. So I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name's Olivia Amaya Ortiz, and I'm an educator here at the School for Advanced Research's Indian Arts Research Center. For those who are logging in virtually and for those who are in attendance, I just want to go ahead and acknowledge that I'm speaking to you from our campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I want to acknowledge that we as an institution are situated on traditional Tewa lands in Ogapoga specifically, also known as White Shell Water Place. And I'm a humbled guest to the land and grateful for the continued stewardship by the many Pueblo, Apache, and Diné peoples who call this greater region home. Tonight, we're all gathered to celebrate our 2022 Ron and Susan Dubin Native Artist Fellow, Hollis Chitto. And I'm so excited to join you as we hear more about Hollis's time spent in residence here at SAR and their creative process in general. It's been an absolute privilege to witness Hollis at work in the Dubin studio and also inside the IARC vaults, closely studying and working with Pueblo pottery pieces. And I can personally attest to Hollis's dedicated work ethic and passion for his craft. So I'll go ahead and tell you a little bit about Hollis if you're not already aware. From a young age, Hollis became enamored with beadwork and embarked on learning the art form. By studying illustrations and through the process of trial and error in his youth, Hollis today has become an accomplished beadwork artist who has been featured in major publications like Vogue and InStyle magazines. And for example, his work can be seen in cover shoots of prominent leaders like Secretary of the Interior Deb Haaland. Chitto's unique style is the product of early exposure to art ecosystems like Swaya and having been constantly surrounded by many talented artists, including his father, Randy Chitto, who is a potter, and SAR's 2006 Ronald and Susan Dubin Native Artist Fellow. I think I heard a little applause in there. And he is in the audience today with us. When one looks at Hollis's work, the influence of traditional Pueblo pottery becomes apparent, and yet he constantly challenges viewers with conceptual and abstract elements. For example, the health and well-being of Native communities is one theme that Chitto interrogates, as HIV and AIDS and queerness are directly inserted into his work, for example. So while in residence, Hollis embarked on a soft sculpture doll project, and initially the goal of this project was to depict a two-spirit couple in beaded and quilled regalia. Over the course of the residency, this vision evolved, and so too did the underlying messages, but I will leave that to Hollis to explain in his own words what that process and final product ended up looking like. We will be very sorry to see Hollis go. But there are many more opportunities to see him again. You can see him and his work at Swaya's Santa Fe Indian Market, which is already next week. Can't believe it's already that time of year. And then their work is also on display at Echo Gallery and True West Gallery in Santa Fe. And before we begin, I just want to mention tonight that we are streaming this event live via our YouTube, so don't get too rowdy out there. Don't make me step in and discipline y'all. But that being said, those who are tuning in virtually, feel free to leave comments and questions. We'll do our best to try to address those over the course of the evening. And for those who are in person, following our Q&A section, we're going to embark on a studio tour. So please do join us afterwards. We have light refreshments, and we'll get to see some of Hollis's work in person. Finally, I would like to thank the Dubin family for their generosity and for supporting this fellowship. And without further ado, please join me in welcoming Hollis Chitto.
Hi. My name is Hollis Chitto. I'm a beadwork and quillwork artist. I'm from Santa Fe, New Mexico. I'm Laguna Pueblo and Isleta Pueblo and Mississippi Choctaw. First, I want to say thank you to the School for Advanced Research and the Indian Arts Research Center and the Dubin family. I'm just incredibly humbled and honored to have been given this opportunity this fellowship is just incredible, and I whenever anybody asks how it's going, I'm just saying I'm incredibly honored and humbled, and I can't say it enough. Honestly, it's a dream. Um, uh, my dad got the Dubin Fellowship in 2006, and since then I knew that it was such a prestigious fellowship, and it was such a prestigious institution, and the Indian Arts Research Center is just a place that I really love being, and I love that it's an amazing resource to have. So this fellowship is definitely one of the milestones that I've been working towards in my career, and I'm just blown away that I got this opportunity. So thank you so much. And again, I could say it over and over, but I'm incredibly humbled. So after my dad got his fellowship, I started volunteering at the Indian Arts Research Center. I ended up going to college for museum studies, and this is definitely one of those reasons why I chose to pursue that. So thank you. I started beadwork when I was 10. 10-year-old little boy just running around being a monster, and I was getting into everything. I got into the garage and just opening boxes, and I found some beads that my mom had tried to teach herself with, and some quills, and I just became enamored. I love color, and I love color's relationship to each other. I always see it as musical notes. So you have a set number of notes and a set number of colors, but what makes them interesting is the relationship between the two. And so I love playing with that and playing with color. That's really what drew me to beadwork in the first place. The first thing I learned, though, is quill work, and I found a French-Canadian quill work book, and it was really interesting. It wasn't a how-to book. It was just like an overview, and I kind of taught myself different quill work techniques from that book, and that's kind of where I just started off. Before then, I was doing clay pieces, shields and masks, wall hangings, like my dad. Well, he does clay. He doesn't do shields or masks, but that was what I did. And what I really started noticing that I loved most about those was adding the embellishments, which included beads. And so it was a pretty good progression from there to kind of just take on beadwork as my medium. Around that time, my mom and dad sponsored Jamie Okuma's Swaya Fellowship, and first of all, her being so young and so accomplished, and her style being so refined really got my imagination going. She started her career with soft sculptures. That's kind of what she was known for. That's what she won her Best of Show for, her first one. And I was just instantly in love with them. My parents were friends with Donna Shakespeare Cummings, who is also a doll artist. And I had known of the Growing Thunders, but what made Jamie Okuma stand out for me was that she attached the doll to the base. And in doing so, she coined the phrase soft sculpture, because it became, instead of a doll, a plaything in its conception, it became a fine art piece that's just art for art's sake. And I totally forgot I had pictures, but this is my this is my early beadwork. Not early, but this is the first one that I am proud to show people. I always say, and you can see that I just go crazy with color. I love color. Uh, yeah, and that's a later piece. That's I did that a couple years ago, and again, color. So what I really liked exploring in my work was the illusion of functionality. Beadwork always has, beadwork in itself isn't functional. It adds beauty to an already functional piece. And that goes kind of across the board. That goes haute couture beadwork, that is North American beadwork, but in that embellishment, it adds functionality. Whatever you add to it becomes functional because it tells a story, or it can become a map if you know how to read the beads. And I just really loved that. And going back to Jamie Okuma's work, is that dolls started out as a teaching tool. They started as, this is your first sewing project or your first beading project. You're going to decorate a doll. And being that it's a doll, you can, play with it. But like I said, attaching it to the base becomes fine art. And I really loved that. I loved that element to it. So with this project, I really wanted to kind of put the functionality back into dolls, or soft sculptures, as they're now called. In a lot of tribes, they are teaching, they show you how to live, how to dress, how to kind of interact with the spiritual world around you. And so, being that, a lot of the soft sculpture makers right now make historic dolls, and they're definitely snapshots in time. And I love that. It's amazing. I don't know how to put myself back in that snapshot of time. What I see right now is the zeitgeist that I would like to explore. What I see right now is a world kind of leaning towards a more accepting view of the fluidity of gender, the fluidity of sexuality. And what I really love is that I can use my art to speak to the moment and also to teach about the moment. And that's another one. That's one of my soft sculptures. I started doing contemporary dolls, kind of more what I would see my friends wearing, or what I would see somebody walking in an Indian market, and I would think that she looks amazing, And that's what I really like to strive for in my soft sculpture work, is seeing how far I can push it into contemporary, and how far I can make it look like a person that is walking down the street that you would look twice at, but you wouldn't think is out of place. So going back, I really love that the zeitgeist, or the kind of worldview right now, is leaning back into two-spiritness. The term two-spirit is a kind of catch-all term for a person who lives in the non-binary gender, the Western non-binary gender. And they were present in almost all tribes. And what's going on right now is that we're reclaiming that. We're reclaiming our space. We're reclaiming our role in society. And I just love that people are doing that now, and that it might be hard, and it was hard for the people that came before, but right now we're trying to make it easier and easier and easier. And in so doing is returning to the importance that we held before. And so my Wewa, everyone knows her. what I want to do with my doll is to kind of express that feeling of change, that we're right on the edge of something it's going to change. Back to what it was, which is, good. So just getting into specifics of what I started here, I started with a doll, or a two-spirit soft sculpture that kind of plays and showcases the fluidity of two-spirit expression now. And a lot of the times you can see two spirits in male-presenting bodies adorning themselves with female-presenting clothing. And I love that. There's a fluidity of two-spiritness that, is just free, and you can be two-spirit and male-presenting in male-presenting clothes. You could be two-spirit, male-presenting and female-presenting clothes. So to really drive it home, I made a male-presenting body for the sculpture, and I wanted to adorn them with a skirt and female-presenting clothing, and just to kind of teach people that is what two-spirit can be. That is a way to express yourself, and that is a way to express who you are in society. And what I really liked was adding the contemporary elements that they're kind of shorthand for queer, like, identifying. So I made a little fan. It's real cute. And he's gonna hold that fan out, and it's gonna say "girl," which does two things. It identifies the doll as female, as doll, as girl. But also, if you're in the know and if you're queer, you can also read it as girl, which, is always fun. And so that kind of brought to mind, when I did that, it brought to mind the work that minorities and two-spirits have to take on, which is to educate the broader audience. And often the onus is for whether it be natives or two-spirits to educate the rest of the population. And there's always that dichotomy, right, of I do want to educate, but also it is work to educate. So going back to the soft sculpture being an educational tool, I'm putting that on her. She's the one that's going to educate, and she's the one that's going to kind of start the conversation in a way that is, respectful and is a good jumping off point. So basically, I started this piece as two male-presenting bodies in male-presenting clothing. And originally, they were going to be, romantic, or like holding each other or holding each other's hands or something. I didn't get that far, but I started about 5 or 6 years ago, and I started with this piece, and I love it. I'm still going to finish it. Then that piece was more of a aspirational for myself. It's what I wanted to see later on in my life. Like hopeless romantic, And thinking about it, I realized that the term two-spirit in its most basic sense isn't about who you love, it's about your role in society. And that's what the gender is. It's not a sexuality, it's a gender. And so that morphed into two friends. My friend Sky gave me a hard time about that. She's like, "Oh, they're just friends now." So, and that's originally what I came into the fellowship planning on, was two spirit dolls laughing, and I always think of two spirit dolls or two spirits as their laughter is medicine, because it's not a secret that the gays are always the funniest in the room. And that's really, I think, what it comes down to, is that two-spirit laughter is medicine. And if we're free enough to express that joy, then it's right. Then it's medicine. In fact, my sister and I have a joke that when we laugh hard enough, and we just, when you laugh and you stop making noise, we had a joke one time, and we were just laughing and laughing, and I was like, "Oh my God, you stopped." And he's like, "That's my second spirit laughing." So I always love that. It always stands out in my mind. But so thinking about that, I started thinking about the first thing that you have to accept in yourself when you take on that mantle of two-spiritness, when you take on that title of two-spirit, is you have to accept yourself. And that's what two-spirit is. It's a more personal choice than what anybody else thinks. It's not your relationship to other people. It's your relationship to yourself foremost. And so that's how I started with this piece. And what I really liked was that I got to think about, again, what I would like to see a two-spirit wearing. And for this piece, I thought about all of my idols and my friends who are two-spirit, what they would like to wear or what they would like to see. My brother Dylan, he's a playwright. He always writes in two spirits in his plays. They kind of, hit a little bit too close to home sometimes. But, they're funny, so I'll take it. My friend Gio Neptune, who's an amazing basket maker, I'm just in awe of how they live their life, and just unabashed and courageous, and just one of my idols and really good friends. My sister Keith, like I said, who's also an amazing beadworker, and I'm just in awe of what he's doing now. And my friend Kellen Trinell, who's also an amazing beadworker and just living the best life, and I can't wait to see what's next with all four of them. But they all have a spot in this piece, and that's definitely my jumping off point, was what are their favorite colors? What would they wear? What would they like to see on somebody? And this fellowship has really given me the chance to kind of experiment with all that stuff. And the time, which is amazing. I love the time here. So what I started with standardizing the armature and the body. Now, whenever I make a soft sculpture, I always say that it takes about 3 months. And when I was here, I realized that I could cut that down significantly if I don't start from square one, if I don't try and reinvent the wheel every time. So my first order of operations was to standardize everything. So I standardized the armature and the skeletal insides of the doll and how to make it posable, and the dimensions. And once that happened, I was able to standardize the clothing and the shoes, and it just unlocked so much opportunities. So I'm really, really happy about that, you know, kind of bummed that I hadn't thought about that before, but here we are. And I'm really happy about it. And, so the thing about my work and the way that I work is I can't draw. So whenever I start a new project, I write lists. I have lists and lists, and I just kind of write the description. It's hard to show people because everyone else is very visual, but I'm very cerebral in that way. And so I write like my checklists. Like first of all, it's like body, base, sculpture, you know, all of that. And then when it comes down to the embellishment, the clothing, I say like my lists are like tops, skirt, bottom, jeans, question mark, you know, moccasins, cuffs, and all that stuff. And I really love how that allows me to work because there's a lot of interpretation in every single bullet point of that. And what I did with this piece is, honestly, I made a pair of jeans, a pair of wrap pants, a skirt, and just the time that I was given here allowed me to experiment with all of those and decide what I wanted for the final vision. I also just tried like 3 shirts, so it's amazing. So what I decided on was a skirt, and I completely forgot to put the picture in, but I wanted to do my interpretation of a ribbon skirt, and the way I did it was to space out the ribbons and kind of float them with the stitching. And that's a older sewing technique, and it's called faggoting, which I loved the pun in that. Which definitely took kind of a while, but I really love how it came out. And again, it's just something that I would like to see in a contemporary setting, in somebody walking down the street, and I think they look cool, you know. So that was definitely my favorite part of this, was that the time I was given. So when I started the doll back with the vest that I showed you, I realized that I didn't have the technical ability that I wanted way back then to kind of give it the respect and execute the vision that I had for them. So growing and kind of maturing as an artist, I realized that now is the time that I can start doing it, which is, you know, amazing, because I can only make my first two-spirit doll once. And I'm really glad that it was here. And so part of that is I got to go into the Indian Arts Research Center vaults, the collection, and look through the historic art. And this piece in particular, I think even in my application and the first day that I got here, I asked her about this pot. This pot was made by a potter who is two-spirit from my pueblo, and not just from my pueblo, but from my village in the pueblo. And she's just incredible, and I can't say her name because it's kind of lost to history, but like the pronunciation. But I love it, and I honestly teared up the first time that I saw it in person. You could just feel the medicine coming from it, and I honestly, every time we go in, I have to just kind of like say hi to it. But what I did with that is I studied it, and I wanted to kind of take her designs into my work. And the way that I did that was I kind of broke down the elements, and I can use those elements in a way to fit my own aesthetic, because overall that pot is hers, and I can't take that away from her. And I just love being in there. Those are some deer that are amazing. Also, there's a lot of deer here, which is really cool. I think we saw like 4 yesterday, which is cool. And then I started looking through the other historic Laguna pots and taking those different elements. This is an amazing Acoma pot that I was blown away with the first time that I went in. And I'm just so excited. Also, I've never sketched this well ever. I'm kind of shocked. But yeah, and so what I was thinking about when we were going into the vaults was that, you know, we know the name of the Two-Spirit potter from my village, but in the collection there's so many pottery. There's so much pottery, and she was not the only Two-Spirit. And I had never thought about that before. And I just kind of thought about how many pots in there were made by Two-Spirits, and how many still have that medicine, and how much prayer went into every pot from the Two-Spirits. And we'll never know their names, which, you know, is unfortunate. So what I wanted to add to the conversation with my self-sculpture is I wanted to add that my name is Hollis Chitto, and I'm a Two-Spirit artist. And that's how I'm gonna, you know, make my mark on the world. And real quick, my mom was teasing me. She was like, you know, you're always picking apricots. Like, are you even beading? Like, is your talk just gonna be apricot-like recipes? So if you want, first you blanch the apricots. You de-seed them, you have to boil them. Thank you.
I have my own mic. I'll stand over here, I suppose. Thank you, Hollis, for your talk. At this time, we will take questions from the audience. I might start off with a few of my own. Thank you. Yeah. I guess one of the last points you just made with some of the designs that you took from pottery pieces, can you explain to us kind of what you plan on doing with those designs next?
Yeah. Like I said, I wanted to take the elements of each design and reconfigure them in a different relationship to each other in order to make you know, a new design. If you go through the collection, you'll see a lot of repeats, a lot of the same curvatures and the same points and spirals kind of repeated, but they don't look tired, or they don't look like they're repeating because of the relationships with each design. And so with my medium, I can also add color to that. And so I'm super, super excited to like start designing everything, and yeah, just giving new life into those designs.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting to reimagine, you know, basically Pueblo pottery onto beadwork designs. I think we have a question in the back.
Yeah, on the vest, the picture of the vest that you put up, in the bottom left there was a horizontal line that crossed the piece. Was that like a spirit line that we see in pottery?
want to go back to the image, and then I'll repeat that for viewers who maybe couldn't hear or joining virtually. So the question was in the vest.
And I know exactly what it is.
The vest that was on display, there was a line, and the question was if that line represents a spirit line.
That represents that I took a picture while I was still working on it. It's that's just the way that the beads are laid down. There's one thread with the beads on it, and that's the loading thread, and then another one with the tacking thread. And I wanted to get it out of the way so it's not just threads on top of it. But yeah, that's a very good observation, though.
After today, it could be.
Yeah,
just
it could
that.
be. I mean,
and all the other.
If
stories
anyone
that were
asks,
told.
it's my idea.
I guess I have another question. I know we don't have the visual of it, but in the sewing or stitching style that you described, it's really interesting. If you can imagine a ribbon skirt that basically has these gaps between the ribbons, so you can literally see through to the figure beneath. I think with most soft sculpture dolls, you might question, like, what is it made out of underneath? But you're actually considering the appearance of the doll beneath it and utilizing that too. Can you speak a little bit more to those ideas?
Yeah, so it goes back to what Two-Spirit is and what you can say identifies as Two-Spirit, or who identifies. And it definitely starts with one's body. It starts with how you present yourself, and then what you put on top of that, because clothing is, first of all, the first way that we identify others, right? Or how we want other people to identify ourselves. And so it really was important to me to not cover the entire body. So the top that you'll see on her is, no sleeves, and you can see the muscle definition, and that goes back to the skirt, because after I'm done with that, I want to put draw tattoos on the legs and kind of embellish in such a way that it makes it more contemporary, because honestly, we all have tattoos now. And I don't think that a contemporary soft sculpture would be honest if it didn't have that kind of marking that makes us all individual.
Thank you. Any other questions in the audience? Yeah. So the question was if the armature is flexible, and okay, so if the armature is flexible, and if it is, then basically how do you consider the gesture of the arm or the figure in general important?
Yeah. So when I started with doing soft sculpture, I had a very rigid way of doing armature, or the internal structure. So all my soft sculptures at first just. And so with this one, that was part of the technical ability that I didn't have before, was I knew that I wanted to make it expressive. So there's so many pictures of me in the studio that I took of myself doing just different poses of how would I stand if I were, clacking a fan, or talking about somebody, or laughing. So there's a bunch of it's pretty embarrassing, but yeah, I definitely wanted to take that into consideration, the gesticulation of fingers, of the head, the S curve of the body when it's standing, because nobody except for my first self-sculpture, Stanley.
Awesome. Any other questions right now? All right. I guess before we wrap up, I feel like I always have to ask, what size beads do you use?
Okay, I usually use size 13s, and generally bead sizes are how many beads fit in an inch whole side up. So the smaller you go, or bigger the number, smaller the beads. So for this one is 16s and smaller. The backgrounds are 22s or 24s, which in hindsight, I shouldn't have used the smallest beads for the background, but there we go. And they're all antiques because they don't make that size bead anymore.
When those of us who go to the studio, I think when
Yeah.
you see it in person, it really puts it into perspective. There was another question back here. So the question is, what material do you make the soft sculpture out of?
Before it was brain tan buckskin and muslin, a lot of muslin. But this piece, since so much of it was going to be shown, and because I had the resources to do it, it's all brain tan buckskin. And honestly, I'm not going back ever. I love, I love having the whole thing brain tan buckskin. It's a native-made leather, and it just holds its shape so elegantly, and you can manipulate the seams in such a way that gives it roundness instead of, a hard line all the way around. You can manipulate it and push it out so that it kind of curves to an arm or curves to a leg, or I just love it now. So it's going to be brain tan buckskin from now on.
Awesome. And I think we'll take 2 more questions from the audience, so go ahead and take yours first. So essentially, it sounds like the question is, with the beadwork, if the forms that are being created are... In the background, how you shape the blue beads go around all the beads. Okay, okay. Because that, to me, was incredible design. So are your designs going to be different, or are they evolving with your two-spirit dolls?
I think that my designs, to answer your question, are, as an artist, you always want to evolve and want to add your experiences to your work. You never want to stay stagnant. And to speak directly to the background, I love doing contour beadwork, which is what you're referencing, is when it follows the design all the way out to the end. I get so tired of doing straight lines when I have to do that. So contour beadwork is always going to stay. Sometimes I add the circles in there just to give it a little bit more texture. But what I really, really dig about beadwork and my beadwork in particular is that doing that contour beadwork shows shapes that I didn't even know were going to happen in the background while I'm working on it. And that's definitely one of the exciting parts of my process, is seeing like the negative space in the background.
Awesome. And I think there was one more question in the back. So essentially the question is asking, historically, perhaps namely in pre-colonial times, how were Two-Spirit folks regarded within their respective tribal communities?
We were the good guys. um, Basically, there's different roles that in traditional, there's different roles in every traditional culture. There's roles that men can do, that women can do, that women can't do, that men can't do. And traditionally, there were roles that Two-Spirits can do, that men and women can do. So it was all part of the mechanisms, the gears that kept society running. And there was an importance and a reverence in that way for those individuals. And then after colonialism and Western society, we're more Western, that's why I did that. The European society, Catholicism, Christianity came by, that definitely took out the good connotations from that, because there's an ingrained way to kind of genocide a people, is if you don't agree with that, then you make them the other, or you make them demonized. So in that way, it was a tool of colonialism to take away that role, and after that, the gears started falling out.
All right, thank you. With that being said, we're going to wrap up here. Hollis and I will sneak out. Try not to pounce on him with more questions, but you can follow us over to the Dubin studio. It'll be an open studio, and like I said, there's refreshments. Thank you, everyone, for listening in on this wonderful talk and conversation from Hollis Chitto.